Hi, this is Eric Martin with BoardGameGeek. Before we get started, let me say if you have tickets for this event, please hand them in just so Gen Con knows what you want to see. If you do not have tickets yet, you can get them from Gen Con and then hand them in. So right now, let me welcome Gunter Eichert and Jim Schuck. And we also have James Dumond. And these are the three designers of One Small Step, released from Academy Games that I believe is just hitting the retail market or just about to.
It's on the boat. It should be hitting the shores in August and shipping to all the early backers of the game. And then it'll be hitting stores this fall.
So the name, the cover, that pretty much gives us an idea of what we are doing in the game. It is very clear and iconic, but just in case there are any questions, maybe give us an overview of the setting of the game and who we are in the game and what we're trying to do.
Sure. This is a worker placement game between the United States. Players are in teams of two between the United States and the Soviet Union. It's a worker placement game. There are engineer workers and administrator workers that will be able to perform different tasks to collect resources, to plan missions, to be able to fly the missions, to advance on your progress to the moon. You're going to collect resources for to build facilities to help your engine, your space agency. Satellite missions will help give you things to help your crew missions. And the crew missions are what drives the game to its final conclusion and victory.
Okay. And the final conclusion is that
I want to add what is really cool and exciting about this game is that it's actually a team worker placement.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it feel very unique just from other Euro games is that you're not a worker placement against everybody else. It's that you're working with another player, coordinating your individual workers placements for your team against another team.
Okay. It's a 2 to 4 player game, so you can just play without the team aspect. I'm on my own.
You can play 1v1 or 2v1 or 2v2.
Okay. And the conclusion of the game mentioned moving towards that, and that is landing on the moon, or is there a different conclusion?
Well,
just that it's a race to land there.
There's a moon track on the lower right corner of the board. And as you fly your crew missions, you're going to advance along that moon track. And whenever a team lands on that final space, that will be the last turn of the game. And you're going to complete that round. And whoever has the highest score at that point will be the winner.
Yeah, I think that's one of the cool parts of the game is the game end is triggered by when one of the teams, either the USA or the USSR, lands on the moon. But that doesn't guarantee that side that lands on the moon wins the game. It is who has done enough to add to the collective human knowledge to make the moon landing possible. And so you could actually land on the moon, but you might not want to actually trigger it because you might not have enough victory points to win.
That's right. It's not impressive enough just to be there first.
Yeah.
Although it does help.
Oh, yeah. Usually they win, but it's not guaranteed.
Yes.
Okay. So maybe give an overview of the board, what we're looking at, what we would be doing on a turn. I don't know if you want to lead us through a sample turn.
Yeah, we can do that. So let me pull up my summary sheet. Do you have a copy of the game, James, currently?
I have the rules.
It always helps me to have my own summary sheet.
Yeah.
Because we work on this game for an entire year, and then you don't touch it for several months.
Yes. That's the common...
Before conventions, I actually have to reread the rules. Especially when you design a game, when you go through different rule iterations. I'm remembering a rule that we end up taking out of the game.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot from designers.
So the game is played in rounds until one person lands on the moon. And there's several phases that both teams will complete within a round. 7 phases, yep. So the first one is a countdown. And this is a cool part. Yeah, they have the player board showing there, the Soviet player board, it looks like. And on the bottom of the track is your mission countdown, your launch, T-1 and T-2 spots. And at the first part of turn, all your missions will advance to the right. So there is kind of a pressure to prepare for the missions you've committed to. And there's repercussions if you're not able to launch a mission in time and have to delay it.
Okay.
After you advance all your missions, you do the replenish phase, because this is a resource gathering and management game at its heart. And so you have actually 9 different resources, and the 9 different resources are actually shown at the very top of the summary sheet to make reference easy. And yeah, sorry. And so you have on the left, you have your agency resources. These are resources that you use to run your agency. They're money, raw materials, and personnel. Then you have satellite resources. And these are all the different sorts of technologies and infrastructure you need to launch unmanned satellite missions. These include the boosters you need to actually get your satellite into space. You have the navigation, which to basically have it go where you want to go, and also your data collection, because it's not enough just to launch a satellite in space. You want it to do something to show that it has worth for all the expense of it. And then on the last 3 are your crew resources. And these are the resources and technologies you need to actually have people survive in space. So you have your capsules, you actually have your re-entry and landing, how can you get people back safely, and your life support, how do you keep them alive in space. So managing all 9 of these resources and balancing them and preparing for the missions that you've committed to is the main struggle and stress of the game.
Excuse me, Gunther.
Yeah.
Just want to also point out that these icons are arranged from left to right of most to least common on those dice that you just showed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it kind of goes in terms of rarity. You have your agency resources. Finding cash and raw materials is relatively easy compared to getting the equipment you need for life support working right. That is kind of that's quite challenging, especially when they were first starting to do this in the 60s.
Okay.
Next, we have the draw card phase. So cards are one, you get to have the chance to draw new missions that you add to your countdown track at the bottom of your resource your board, and you'll be able to draw event cards. And event cards let you develop your agency in special ways, and also recruit personnel who are based off historical figures during that period.
Okay.
After the draw phase, we come to the main meat of the game. The first 3 phases are really largely upkeep phases, just to keep the game going. The worker placement phase is where the majority of the competition between teams happens. And this is where the team aspect also comes into play. Each team has 2 different types of workers, as James mentioned. You have your engineer workers. I know they'll be showing them too, but I'll show them in my camera as well. Each team has their engineer workers, these little meeples. They have cool little clipboards. I have terrible lighting, so. And then you have your what do we call them?
Administrators.
Administrative workers. These guys went through like 5 different names before we finally settled on administrative.
Yeah.
And one player on your team controls their 2 engineer workers, and the other player controls the 2 administrative workers. If you're playing only one person on your team, you control both pairs of workers. So during the worker placement, just back and forth, taking turns placing workers. But who places their workers first is a big important thing of any worker placement game. And this is where media plays a huge role. Your media is shown in the top right corner of the board. And whoever has the most media is representing both the public support for your space program how the media is portraying it, and also your governmental and congressional support for the space program. How much funding are they approving for it? So whoever has the most media gets to go first in any of these phases, including the worker placement phase. So when you place a worker, you can place them on 2 different areas of the board. The top left part is a picture of the Earth, and we have all these Earth spaces on the map. There is a total of 6. And when you place a worker on one of these 6 spaces, what that space does depends on which type of worker you place. If you place an engineer, I believe you do the top portion of the action.
Yeah, it's the top half.
And if you place an administrator, you do the bottom part of the action. So which type of worker you place is very important. What's also important is that if there's already a worker on the space, another worker cannot be placed there. This means if you place an engineer or your opponents place a worker on that action, you're blocking your teammate from also placing there. So there's an opportunity cost to every action you choose to do. And that's where the teamwork and a little struggle between teammates comes in. They both might want to be using their respective actions that's gained from a space. And as they're showing, there's a summary sheet, and we use icons on the board, but the summary sheet provides a detailed text explanation of what each of these spaces does. We're not going to go over what these spaces do, but they gain you resources. They let you do things like place hazards on enemy missions. Hazards make the missions more difficult for your opponent. They let you manipulate your media and do all sorts of fun worker placement things you find in many other worker placement games. The second place you can place workers are on the face-up event cards on the bottom left of the board. There are always 4 face-up at the beginning of each worker placement phase. And when you place a worker on there, you get an immediate effect. But at the end of the phase, at the end of the worker phase, you'll also draft that card into your hand. So you're not only gaining the immediate effect, but you're also drafting a card in your hand to engine build your agency later in the game. So again, every action you take either has an opportunity cost or has a multiple effect synergistic engine building effect. And that's what I really love about this game. I think you'd agree, James, is
Yes.
that there's multiple repercussions and bonuses for every action you take, and there's all these different avenues for you to explore, and cool interplays of how different cards interact with actions on the board and other cards you have drafted.
Incidentally, placing a worker on those development cards that are face up on the board is how you draft them into your hand.
Yes.
After all the workers are placed, you're going to pick up the workers and return them to your agency card. And workers that are placed on the development cards are going to carry those cards back with them to your agency.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I want to note that, remember, before this worker placement phase, you also got to draw 2 cards. And what's nice about that is that you have the chance to draw a card blindly from the deck. And of course, it's blind for you, but it also, your opponent does not know what cards you drew into your hand. And so that while the cards you draft are face up, that adds a little bit of unknown between the sides and lets you actually surprise each other if you play your cards right. After the worker placement phase, we come to the personnel phase. And the personnel are specific types of cards that you can draft. So a personnel card is a type of event card.
I think Lincoln had Al Shepard out.
Yes.
Yes.
And right away, when you draft a personnel card, they go right to the right of your player board. And personnel, during the personnel phase, require you to spend personnel resources to activate their once a turn ability. And you use these abilities again during the personnel phase. We made that its own phase. It just clears up the rules and makes it clear when do I use my personnel and how do they affect the rest of the game. So they have their nice part of the turn that you use those in. And this is where we introduce all the famous personalities and important scientists and administrators and astronauts that made the moon landing possible. Because almost everybody should know Neil Armstrong. They know who landed on the moon, but what about all the scientists that made that possible? And that's where a game like this helps people learn more about the space race and the vast teamwork and effort it took to make this possible and the years of effort. This was not just one mission. This was quite a few missions, both manned and unmanned, before it was actually possible. And to me, it's still amazing that they actually achieved it with how little time it really took. They managed to really do it like I believe like a decade, right, James?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's one of the fun things about the personnel phase. You get to learn about all the people. During the play card phase, after personnel phase, this is where you get to play those cards that you draft in your hand. Again, we made its own phase, so it has a nice, neat part of the turn where you know this is where you can play your cards. And this is what you're going to be spending your other agency resources, your funding and your raw materials on.
Some of them also require personnel, and that'll be like on the third tier of cards.
Yeah, a few.
Yeah.
And often these will either usually these give an instantaneous bonus to your agency. Now, the kind of things that these cards do, and some of the workers' placement phases, is a big part of the game is your resources. And when you usually spend a resource, but often cards, you have the opportunity to upgrade your temporary resources to permanent resources. And permanent resources don't get spent permanently when you spend them. They will refresh during the replenish phase at the beginning of a new phase. And this is where you start specializing your agency. You'll say, we plan on doing a lot of satellite missions. So we are going to specialize in data collection. Draft a card and then eventually play a card that turns a temporary data collection resource. And this is one of the primary engine building. Anything to add, James?
No, not really. Just that the agency resources are where the engine building happens in the game. And these development cards that you draft and then draw in the draw cards phase is what you're buying with that stuff.
Okay.
So after we play cards, we get to the culmination of everything, the launch phase. And this is where any cards that are in the launch position of your agency board on your countdown track will launch. Now, every mission, if you guys want to bring up a mission card.
Hey, Nikki.
Yeah. Every mission has three levels of achievement. The topmost, which has a little 1 to the left of it, is your minor success. To achieve that, you have to pay here the 2 resources. Let me make that screen big so I can read what that is. You can pay a booster and a data collection to achieve a minor success in your Pioneer 10 satellite mission. If you do that, you get all the bonuses to the right, which let you do things like increase your media, upgrade one of your temporary resources to a permanent resource, and some other bonuses we'll go over later. Then, underneath the minor success, next to the yellow light bulb with a 2, you have your major success. If, in addition to the cost of a minor success, you also pay the major success, which for the Pioneer 10 is 2 more data collection, you would also gain the additional rewards to the right of the major success. So one big thing here is almost always you'll be able to achieve the minor success, but you're really trying to go for that major success to just get ahead of your opponent. But if you cannot even achieve a minor success, you fail the mission, which is by the X. And in the case for Pioneer 10, you lose media because the public is either losing faith for you, Congress decides maybe this is not where they want to be spending their funding.
You're throwing money away.
Yes. So gathering these resources to launch these missions is a big thing. And then making sure that you're using permanent resources rather than temporary resources is a huge part of the game. Because if you can spend a booster as a permanent resource rather than temporary, you'd be able to use that resource for a future mission rather than waste it permanently.
Right.
And then out of launching these missions, there are 2 victory kind of progressions here. For satellite missions, when you launch a satellite mission, you get to pick up a satellite token from the Earth part of the map in the top left. If Nikki, you want to grab one of these satellite tokens, and you get to move it into orbit. And you'll flip it to your side to show that you launched it. Every token has an American and a Soviet side to it. So if the Americans launch a satellite mission, you'd actually put in the orbit around Earth to show that a satellite has launched into space. And it's a cool way to track, who's launched more satellites into space. Then
I want to mention real quick about the rewards.
Yeah.
It's kind of important also to point out that they're awarded in order from left to right, top to bottom. And the order matters because I think on the example card you showed, the upgrade token icon is shown before you earn any new resources from that mission. So it would have to be applied to something you've already got on hand.
All right.
Instead of something you just earned from flying that thing.
Yeah, because sometimes you gain new resources, new insight from launching a mission, and that can't automatically be a permanent resource, is what James is explaining.
So we have another minute, and then we need to wrap. So
sorry, did you say something?
Make sure. Yeah, we have another minute, and then we need to wrap at that point. So just want to.
We have another minute. Okay, good.
Yeah, you ran through the entire turn. Yeah, you got us to the end, to the launch
touch
point.
On the last important cool part of the game is as you're removing these tokens off of the Earth board, it's actually upgrading the actions for both teams. So when you launch a mission, you're not only gaining knowledge for your own agency, you're gaining knowledge for all of humanity and actually progressing their space agency too. And so that's one of the unique things is that you're not only building your engine on your success, you're also having to choose how you're building both of your engines in addition to your own engine. But yeah, sorry we talked so much. Do you have any last minute questions?
No, you ran through everything. The only question is up at the upper right, that's a different Earth board. So you have a different set of actions if you want to have variety in what you're doing. Or is that an overlay?
We have a beginner track, a beginner board with simpler actions. So you have to learn less. It's a little bit more of a curated experience. So the first time you play, you'll play with that overlay. It actually does not have any upgrades on the actions, as I just explained. So you won't have to understand how actions will change as the game goes on, because that's hard for new players. You haven't played. You don't know what the ramifications of these actions are.
Okay. All right. Yeah. James and Gunter, you ran through everything, succinctly gave an idea of the flow of the game, the turn, and we worked through that, obviously progressing through the missions and planning ahead for that. I know Jim was answering questions in chat. I thank him for that as well. It's great to have that. And thank you very much for your time. Looking at One Small Step, available to backers or sent to backers in August, and then available soon on the retail market. So thank you very much. Glad you guys could join us.
You're welcome.